the food pyramid. A bowl of like sugary cereal was better for you than like a piece of like grilled chicken. And they're
Yeah.
still trying to like sell us this thing of like eat lots of bread and grains. And there's a lot of that's on the internet because there's a lot of doctors and health gurus that are able now to have a platform that, because social media is now allowing things to be recommended from the algorithm, like you can actually find this stuff, and you can get a lot of other sources of health information. It's like music. I believe music is like the lingua franca of humanity. Like, regardless of what language you speak or where you live, melody is a universal language. That's why movie score is so powerful. It's like Bob Marley's song War and those lyrics, and we see what's happening today on the planet. And he was like a prophet. I mean, he said it all, and he actually stopped two warring parties in Jamaica. He brought the two leaders on stage. It stopped like a civil war. I mean, it's an incredible story.
Well, Ash, welcome to Elevated Conversations. It's great to have you on, and I know this is going to be a very interesting chat today. So, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So, your journey. We were talking before we went on camera, and officially started recording it all. Often people talk about the hero's journey, or people talk about how, oh my gosh, my life's been a heck of a story. When you look back on your life and how things have played out, have you found for you that being into self-development or the idea of the spirit, the soul, the etc., has that always been there in you waiting to come out, or is it something that you've found more recently in your life?
No, it definitely at a young age. A lot of times I actually give myself a harder time about being more into my own practice of spirituality from when I was younger, when I used to play music. Because in my early 20s, it was probably because life was simpler and I had more time and there was a lot of downtime traveling, but I was so good about reading and doing meditation and reading all the different, that's when I first got into unconditional healing. I'm sorry, unconditional life and quantum healing by Deepak Chopra. But I was so good at, and also how like fearless and passionate I was about everything, human rights, fighting for equality, social justice, all these things. And then I feel like as I got older, I was more sensitive to it because everything is so touchy as you become an adult and you're in business and you're in all these different things and you start psychoanalyzing everything that comes out of your mouth a bit more. And then as I've gotten, ever since like I turned 40 and had a child, now I'm kind of getting back to how I was early 20s. Like, you know what? Like, life is short. I want my son to know when he's older, he can see that, I had my, was just passionate about all the beliefs and being, vocal and true to it and all that stuff. So,
Mhm.
but it started at an early age. I mean, even just like hearing Bob Marley and a lot of Bob Marley lyrics when I was really young really opened my eyes, and I started, just researching more about what his lyrics meant. Because, when you're a kid, like you're like, what does that mean? And what is that saying? And what is that slang? And yeah, it's always been a big source of just kind of guidance and inspiration. Not so much like one specific um religion, but more just the belief that we're way more than these bodies. There's much more to what we are than the physical.
Yeah, there you go. And that's the saucy bit right there. Have you ever had those moments where you're like standing there in the supermarket or something and you have a look around and you realize that maybe 90% of the people around you are completely asleep and they don't even realize they've got a soul? You have one of those moments where it's like, wow, look at life going on around me. Have you ever done that?
I that happens a lot when you're sitting in traffic in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But no, I know exactly what you mean. And it's unfortunate. I always thought if I'm always thinking, like, how can the world really get better fast? Just with how we treat each other and how we carry ourselves. And I just wish that the concept of karma, and if you believe that it's real and every action has an equal and opposite reaction, which I feel like is kind of like science proving karma. But I just really believe if people truly believed that karma was real, the way we believe completely black and white about water and oxygen. Like if I don't have water, I'm dead. If I don't have oxygen, I'm dead. There's no discussion. Water and oxygen. If people looked at karma the way we look at water and oxygen, that it was just matter of fact, and there's nothing up for debate. If you do something bad, it's going to come back to you.
Mm.
If everyone believed that, I mean, the place could get a lot better overnight.
Mm.
Yeah.
And we talk about truth. I love that you mentioned, you've got a son. Congratulations. It's such a blessing to, get back into your childhood play and authentic soul, the real one that you're remembering now. And I love that you said about like teaching them the truth, because we often do that with our two boys as well. Like, say something nice about yourself that you love before bed, so they're reminded to love themselves, not constantly looking outside of themselves, but looking at this, black and white water, oxygen necessity for life and karma, and seeing that, the authorities, they're not teaching us this because it's, easier for everyone to have karma and some energetic, anchors hanging off them because it keeps us in a low frequency. And I guess that's the illusion that we're all learning about, and seeing the truth of, perhaps the establishment and the society right now and the school system. I mean, how old's your son? Is he going into school? Have you seen these constructs yourself yet?
No, he's 2 years and 3 months.
Yeah.
So we took him to like a group like storytelling class yesterday, which like other kids up here in Lake Tahoe right now that are just like at like the local coffee bookshop. That was fun. And we've taken him to like a music class. He loves music, but we haven't done like straight up preschool or anything yet. Not that we won't, but there hasn't been anything that's like a true, like I think swimming classes, like stuff like that, but nothing that's like just the school system itself yet.
Yeah, yeah. And you can kind of understand what we're getting taught in school. It really is a foundation of our growth, right? So us light warriors and yourself, and we're just all undoing these patterns and, coming to that consciousness of holding these truths. So I know that you're an advocate for truth. So, what's happening in your world that you're very passionate about in terms of, being a leader in consciousness?
Um, well, if we're specifically talking like on the spiritual side, I mean, I try and focus it on things that will be more unifying, because a lot of, obviously all religion is supposed to be rooted in spirituality. Of course, that all gets lost a lot when people become too finite, attached to like words and just expressions and writings of ancient scriptures and things. It's really kind of loses. I always am a believer the most important things about any religion, they all kind of have in common, and there's a through line. And then as soon as you start picking off, well, this means that and this means that, it's like there's only so many ways you can manipulate things, like treat others as you want to be treated, love thy neighbor, don't steal, don't hurt people, and then all these other things get taken out of that. But I just the concept of karma in and of itself, I really do try and spread that to even like people that work for me, my own staff. Like I try and say, hey, let's have a moral compass. I feel like I take a very probably a very Buddhist approach to business to a certain degree. And I can thank my wonderful therapist, Dr. Julian Neal, who is a practicing Buddhist and a lovely man, and helps a lot of people. But that doesn't mean like rolling over in business, but like I'm proud that like especially in entertainment and in music and being a record label, we've never been sued. We've never had anything that's got like litigious like that. We usually end up having very long, mutually beneficial relationships with our artists and with our partners that we work with. And, I don't know. I mean, there's a balance between not being soft and rolling over, but also trying to have like a good moral compass and believing that, hey, if we do good work and we're successful, everybody wins. And I
Mm.
think that, I have I have kind of like a chip on my shoulder about how Hollywood and in general kind of like movies like usually make the record label look bad, because historically there have been a lot of, greedy record companies and, questionable label executives, but there's also really, really great ones. And so I'm always like, hey, like there's good guys in this too that aren't just like all about dollars and cents and contracts and money and total control and market share and all that stuff. But we also try and be like a safe space for all of our artists, whatever their spiritual beliefs are, whatever their personal beliefs are when it comes to, medicine and speech and everything. There's obviously been so much division and polarization that's happened throughout the past, handful of years. So, as far as like I guess the main spiritual practice, I try and bring that I just try and bring that energy to a world that's usually kind of stereotypically very like business and this and but it's like music. I believe music is like the lingua franca of humanity. Like regardless of what language you speak or where you live, melody is a universal language. That's why movie score is so powerful when there's not even any lyrics. It's just the score to the scene, and you know what the emotion that the director or the writer is trying to evoke, or the composer. So I try and remind myself and everyone we work with that like we're very lucky. Like it's a privilege to work in the arts, in any
Mm.
type of art, music, film, visuals, anything. So we should always, practice gratitude that we actually are allowed to do it. And if we can make money doing what we love, like we're very, very fortunate. A
Mm.
lot of times this stuff just gets taken for granted. And, I mean, the biggest thing is just the human ego. I mean, that's where everything goes off the trails because the spirit and the ego are not, it's,
We
yeah.
totally agree. It's so nice to hear that you're, that recognition will come to you because you are in your integrity and truth and that love compared to the old energy flows that are crumbling. Those structures are all now crumbling and distortions are being seen. So it's great to see, you in your business and with that integrity. So it's so wonderful because we need all different lights in all the different areas of society to help elevate the planet, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that, through your label, you encourage, it's a gift, isn't it, in a way, when you're a creative person, because sometimes people, this, how do you make the world a better place type thing that you hear people throw around. Well, when you're working in the creative arts, there's a beautiful opportunity to be able to sprinkle a little bit of, let's call it wisdom of the universe, a little bit of spiritual truth, a little bit of principles of, let's say, your example of karma in there, so that you can touch the lives of people in a way which is subtle and not so like in their face, right? Like, because
Yeah.
sometimes people, they don't want to be preached to,
Mm.
but when something's in a song, they can accept it a lot easier. Does that make sense?
Big time. Big time. Yeah. I mean, the power of lyrics in a song to just, it's like Bob Marley's song War and those lyrics, and we see what's happening today on the planet. And it's like
Mm.
he was like a prophet. I mean, he said it all, and he actually stopped, two warring parties in Jamaica. He brought the two leaders on stage. It showed from the power of
Oh, got
music and lyrics.
chills.
He really stopped like a civil war. I mean, it's an incredible story. But yeah, that's the power of, that's a lot, some musicians and artists and industry people will be like, never say anything too specific because you know, you have to just be an artist and please everyone, but also like other people, which is why I have so much respect for Serge Tankian from System of a Down. You know, when you're an influential artist and you have a platform and you have, you know, hundreds of thousands or millions and millions of followers in his case, like, you know, a lot of people feel like that's how can you not have some type of, you know, stance when you are an influential artist to speak your truth, whether
Mm.
that's spiritual or sociological or whatever. And you know, I think we've gone through a weird time where a lot of people I think have become scared to just speak their truth because of whether it's cancel culture, whether it's bots on the internet, whether it's internet bullying, whether it's, you know, politics and entertainment, whatever it is, it's just I've noticed a lot of people, you know, because I'm kind of like you know, a lot of them confide in me and they're like, I want to express myself this, but I'm scared. And they, you know, and we,
Mm.
like I said, we support all of our artists, however they want to roll, we have their back. But it's definitely not, I mean, I'll say this, I guess probably the easiest way to sum it up. It's not like it was in the 90s. I mean, in the 90s, again, Pearl Jam, like everyone was speaking their truth. Free
Mm.
Tibet concerts. Like it was like we were, you know, it was a different time. And I think it's starting to get back more to that. But yeah, there's just been, you know, censorship on the internet. There's just been so many things that have kind of lost the plot of, you know, what a lot of things. I mean, the whole point of the internet was there wasn't censorship.
Mm.
You know, the whole point of the power of music, especially rock and roll, is you say anything you want, you keep it real to yourself. So I'm excited now that I think that's coming back, but we definitely went through a period and it's still there, but especially like the past 4 or 5 years where it was, I mean, I don't need, I mean, people know what I'm talking about. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very, it
Yeah,
became
we
very
totally
apparent.
agree. We saw it as
Yeah.
well. Like people were afraid to express themselves, whether they're this or this on this side, you know.
Yeah.
And
And even things that we should all agree on. Like I use like the morning cereal in America as an example. Like there's no reason that kids should be eating Fruit Loops with all these chemicals, artificial this, all the data's come out. It's terrible for them. The dyes, the government doesn't have to tell us anything that's even in these chemicals. It just says artificial this. And all these other countries are banning it. Like even like the bottled water, like you can't get Aquafina and Dasani in the UK. Like you can't have like this like, you know, quote unquote purified Coca-Cola or Pepsi water. But even when you look at like Doritos, the ingredients in Doritos in the UK are totally different than the US. Same thing, like Lucky Charms, I think, are altogether banned in the UK. But there's all these things that we grew up with that we just accustomed to be normal. And then everyone's waking up and realizing, wow, like we should not have all these, you know, man-made synthetic chemicals in our food. And I know a lot of people like, dude, I totally agree, but like, I'm scared if I post about it online that,
mm,
yeah, I think this is crazy with Kellogg's is people are going to think I'm some like tinfoil hat person. But I'm like, but what if you like influence a friend or someone you know and they start feeding their kid better food? That's how, you know, you want to talk about the world getting better. It's all in how the next generation is raised and it's parenting and it's awareness and knowledge of all of this stuff. I mean, even with what you put in your body when you wake up in the morning, that sets the tone for everything else. If you're putting a bunch of chemicals in there that are illegal in most of the world, you should
yeah,
scratch your head and
totally.
go, wait a second, how come I'm allowed to eat this but no one
Yeah.
else is? It's not because it's organic.
Totally. It's so crazy,
Yeah.
isn't it? Like those Lucky Charms, like
Oh,
the kids,
goodness.
they're so it's the product, it's like
And that was
right.
my favorite cereal. By the way, that was my favorite. I'm not being holier than thou. I'm just being
No,
like, hey, I'm awake now.
yeah,
That was my favorite cereal as a kid. Okay.
yeah.
I would eat all the oats and leave the marshmallows at the end and then binge on the marshmallows at the end of the bowl. My favorite cereal. I had no idea that it was like a bunch of weird chemicals. It wasn't even a thought when I'm 12 years old chowing down. But now, again, thanks to, I think, the internet and social media and just awareness and people that are focused on health and longevity, you know, now a 12-year-old kid can be aware of that,
Yeah.
especially if a musician or an actor or an athlete or a painter, whoever that they look up to says, hey, guess what, guys? There's a bunch of weird chemicals in your cereal. Maybe we shouldn't eat this, you know?
Yeah.
Of
Um,
course.
but yeah, even then people get weird about, oh, I don't want to offend people if they eat Lucky Charms and they think I'm saying what they're eating is bad. But it's like,
Mm.
you know, eventually you got to say something about something.
Right,
Yeah.
totally.
And this is like, you know, I love that you're a big advocate for truth. And there's this so-called war on consciousness.
Yeah.
And this war on consciousness is, in a way, a war on truth and people being
Yeah.
able to call out, right? For example, big business that is clearly, you know, selling products that aren't particularly good. Big media who are telling stories that aren't balanced. Once upon a time, it was a respectable job to be a journalist, and they would do a proper investigation and they would post a story which was balanced and unbiased. Well, that doesn't happen anymore, right? It's probably not since the 90s, right? When the music was back, that's where it was started changing. The internet brought this on. So now we understand that even, let's say, universities to a certain degree, and the studies that they do, a lot of these studies aren't balanced, right? They're funded by big business to promote an outcome which supports their product or their line or their story or their agenda. We can't trust the politicians anymore. Can't seem to trust the, you know, this one, that one, the next one. And people are starting to see this. And some people don't want to know about it. They want to bury their head in the sand and go, I don't want to know. It's
Just
too
wanna
much.
go to work.
I got too much else going on in my life, right? I got all this other crap. I need the government to take care of, you know, looking after me so that I could just do my day-to-day, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems like that's not going to fly because we lose more and more and more control, which was evident over the last 4 years, right?
Yeah, big time. I mean, it's the whole saying, ignorance is bliss. Some people just don't want to know, and they just have their blinders on. It's really unfortunate. That's why I have a lot of respect for Jon Stewart. You know, Jon Stewart came back recently as a A-list talk show host, public figure, and he's been even saying, he goes, I'm trying to interview all these journalists and reporters and their bosses, you know, whatever networks they work for, like they won't even let them give their opinion. Like they're literally being silenced, and we're supposed to be the beacon of free speech on planet Earth. And it, you know, that's why when I hope that young people know how powerful and important that is. I mean, you're seeing right now in the UK, people are getting arrested for making controversial Facebook posts. Even if they say something stupid on the internet, you still shouldn't be able to be thrown in jail for
I
typing
didn't know
something.
that. I didn't know that was happening.
Oh yeah, it just came out. They're in jail. There's videos of the people getting arrested. The guy's like filming it, and he's like, "Why am I being arrested?" You know, for your Facebook post. It's like, what?
Mm.
You know, it's a lot. Free speech is not something that's just like common all over the world. It's really not. Like it's there's only a certain places where you truly can have free speech, and you know, that's that's the scariest part of just having too much corporate influence when there's um you know, when there's money at play. Like if you have enough money, you can get, you know, it's like I'm a big pro wrestling fan. The film I have that's in post right now is about the first ever female pro wrestler. But pro wrestling has always been a huge love of mine. And there was a character, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and he was a heel. He was a bad guy, big in the 80s, you know. And his whole thing was, you know, everybody's got a price. And he would start laughing, you know, like every man's got a price. And there's so much money that comes in from these corporations and publicly traded companies that come in everywhere to the areas that should not be taking outside money. And that's not like a left or a right thing. That's more, there's, because both sides take money, you know, and then the people that are in the middle or independent don't ever get to like have enough of a platform to even make a difference. So you constantly have all of this money coming in from is their product, their market share, their stock price. Their agenda is not spirituality and truth,
No.
because spirituality and truth and transparency is not good for the weekly sales of Lucky Charms or some new, you know, fat loss pill that's good this week and next week it's banned because whatever it. I mean, even things like Sweet and Low. I never liked fake sugars. I always thought they were disgusting. But I remember as a kid, the Sweet and Low packets used to say in red letters, because at the cafeteria in school, we'd always be like, dude, that's crazy. It says this has been shown to cause cancer in laboratory animals. Throughout all junior high and high school, they had red letters and a warning on sweet and low. This causes cancer in laboratory animals. At some point, they removed that. And now, so they didn't change their ingredients, but sweet and low now doesn't have to tell you that lab animals get cancer from eating it. It's probably because somebody wrote a check to someone and said, hey, can we get that off? That's not good for our sales.
Exactly.
We don't need kids or adults reading the little letters about this giving cancer to mammals. Let's just leave that off and put the sweet and low back on the table, you know?
Mm.
But
they probably funded a university study, which that didn't happen every time. So they could
there you go.
Brother, here we
You know,
go. That's the truth.
I try and tell people too, when it comes to looking at things from an entertainment perspective, whether it's music or film, you know, the digital age has allowed these industries to pivot and evolve and survive once physical has gone away, right? So like, it doesn't matter if you sell a CD or a DVD. If you're an album or a movie, you can still generate all sorts of money and success based on digital. Now, if you look at these other companies that historically have always been incredibly powerful, specifically companies that make weapons of war and pharmaceutical companies, guess what? There's no digital for them. So if you're a pharmaceutical company and you don't have pills going in a mouth or needles in an arm, you can't just have a digital stream of your medicine. You have to have physical product shipping. Same thing for if you make bombs or fighter jets. If there's not bombs getting dropped and fighter jets flying around and getting shot down, you're not shipping more units. So imagine from a music or movie perspective, what would our industries go through to make sure that we could still sell CDs, still sell DVDs, if that was the only way we could make money?
Yeah.
Because there's no digital anything for music or film in the way that for war and pharmaceuticals, that's the only way. They can't make money digitally, right? Selling cybersecurity software is not the same as selling thousands and thousands of bombs. So when you look at stuff like what just happened last week, the stock market crashes, but guess who's up 23% on the month? Lockheed Martin. War. Let's drop some bombs, raise our stock price. Like,
you know, it's so interesting. I never actually had thought of that perspective. So thanks for sharing it, because it's really,
they got to have physical. There's no, and that's why I tell my friends on the, I go, guys, think about it. I'll tell you right now, as a record label owner, if we could only make money selling CDs, I'd be on the phone with the booking agents, with the promoters, with the venues. They got to buy a CD to come see the show. That's the only way you can let them through the door. If they don't buy the CD, we're done, because we have to be able to sell the CDs. So put the CD at the front door, right? Movies. Once it's in the box office, we need people to buy the DVD.
yeah.
To when they're going to the AMC to see the Friday night movie, they got to sell them the DVD.
And you
But
got
they're
to,
already, we got to sell it to them. That's the deal. That's the only way we're giving you a movie. You got to sell them the DVD too. But we don't need to worry about that because it's digital. Digital's great for music.
so
Digital's
at
great
all
for
costs, these companies are going to make a physical item happen. Can you imagine all of the thoughts and energy behind making a war or making something bad so their physical items can be sold so they're profitable, right? It's not
That's
a copy
it. I
and
mean,
paste on the internet, right? And it's the same with people being healed and elevating their frequency. It's a energetic exchange. There's no money in that, right? There's no money. It's very similar to the record label and the movies. It's very easy to give energy because it's not material. So there's no gain. There's no financial gain out of that. And so as humanity evolves, these companies are losing control because they can't sell a physical item to have that, you know, reward of money anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you were to say in one sentence to kind of sum up so much of what's going on culturally with finances and, you know, transparency and control and all these things, it's kind of like a war between old money and new money, because until the internet existed, you couldn't really get, I mean, very rarely, but you couldn't really like scale something so big that all of a sudden you have all of this like wealth and power, you know? Like if you look at like a Jeff Bezos and Amazon, like how does that happen in the 60s? Like maybe you have a patent and you create, you know, Coca-Cola or something, but like it was much trickier and harder. And there was just more gatekeepers to be able to become massively wealthy, like a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk, or, Elon, what his first fortune was like PayPal. Like, again, it's an internet scalable thing. Mark Cuban was an internet site. Boom. Like, the internet totally disrupted the entire history of wealth with human beings, because there were now things can happen globally and scale. And it's the beauty of that is also with art. Like, when we were kids, like, if you weren't on MTV and the radio, you couldn't really be a big band. If you were an independent film, if you weren't with a huge distributor in one of the big studios in every movie theater, you couldn't really be like that big of a movie. And now, because of the internet, like, independent films, independent musicians, you can you can win Best Picture as an independent film. You can have a 9-figure box office as an independent film. You can be an independent musician. Everyone's got Spotify or YouTube and have the biggest song in the world and not even, be on a major record company. So it's the beauty of it. The flip side, I guess, is like, I use the example of like a pencil. Like, a freshly sharpened pencil can write the best song or the best story ever told, or a love letter or a beautiful speech, or it can stab someone in the neck and kill them. And it's all in the power of the person holding it. The pencil itself is just a sharpened pencil. That's like the internet. You can use it to spread awareness and truth and love and spirituality or positive messages, or you can use it to be dark and divisive and evil and whatever. But it's just the sharpened pencil. It's all in what the holder does with it. So that's why, with what you guys are talking about with like spirituality and truth, it's kind of more important than ever, because everyone's got so much power now that everyone is all connected. And that's sad. The sad part about that is just seeing the bullying on the internet. I mean, there's so much bullying in comments, both to normal people and to celebrities. It's like, it's pretty wicked. And I wonder sometimes, like, is that a real person spending all their time just sitting there posting something negative and mean, or is that a bot? Like, is that just like a program? Like, but it's pretty overwhelming how much negativity there is on the internet. And I think that's really sad for young kids that are growing up with that. It was hard enough being in junior high and trying to be like, have friends, not get picked on. And now, like, everyone's got the internet and these kids are growing up with social media. I don't think, more times than not, I think it's negative for the child than it is a positive thing. It's very overwhelming too.
I mean, just the recent circus act on the global stage in your country last month was very concerning for the kids to watch. The separation and the hatred towards two leaders, that's programming these younger generations to behave like that, in an essence. It's horrible. It's like very disturbing. And, these platforms, yes, they're owned by these bigger corporations, and you've got to play the game. You've got to be wise with how you promote these truths and, play the game. That's why we're here. We're here to work out the game, crack the code on the game, and then play inside of these games to spread that love and the light in a truth way to help and spread. And the internet's a beautiful thing. It's powerful. I mean, in your industry, wow, it gave you guys rockets, like to launch to global markets, which wasn't happening before in such an easy, accessible way. And, this spiritual intelligence is a very similar thing, because we can learn so much in such a quick amount of time, and learn from other people via the internet. So I feel like if you're in truth and sharing truth in a positive way, you're not going to get knocked back. If it's with love, and you mentioned before, with unity, with integrity, I think it's when we attack and project and, call people out, that's when you're in trouble inside of the matrix game of the internet. But I sense that, like, if we all just rise above and continuously put out there and demonstrate good acts of kindness, compassion, these leaders that you're dealing with as well, they could have an effect by just playing that game rather than, getting on a side and projecting and fighting.
It's so juvenile and so low vibration, low frequency. Like, if you look at, I mean, just an example, again, going back to music and film, like, if you have two bands co-headlining on a show or one's opening for the other, they're not being like, hey, we were better than the guys that just came up
No.
before us, right? Yeah, it's like, no, we're all here celebrating, and they shout each other out. And it's like, if you know, two movies that are competing at a film festival for awards, the writers and the directors and the producers don't start, they're happy for each other. You see the Olympics are very inspiring. Whether you won gold or silver, different countries, and the girls in the gymnastics are also supportive of each other. It's beautiful. You look at modern politics, it's disgusting. And it wasn't always like that. Like there's a great debate I recently watched from 1960, and it's like Kennedy and Nixon, and it's like the presidential debate that we just went through. And they're basically saying like, yes, I have so much respect for him, and I'm sure he would say the same thing about me. It's really just a question of who do you want to lead. And it's just like, it's so respectful. You know what I mean? It was like, you would have thought it was another civilization in a distant galaxy far, far away. They're just like, yes, I respect him and he respects me, and we're going to debate. Thank you. And now it's like you got two 14-year-olds arguing with each other like a popularity contest at junior high. It's like really bizarre. I mean, and it wasn't always like that.
And it's so in a way, right? Standards have gone down, if you were to talk about it in that regard. And, from a spiritual perspective for a moment, the idea of those channelings from the law of one puts it very simply for humanity, in that humanity needs to go from being service to self orientated into service to others. This is where the shift will take place. When we talk, I loved your point about karma. I thought that was beautiful, because that ties exactly in with this. Because when you're service to self, all you care about, obviously, is yourself. And you'll do whatever it takes to keep yourself in power, because a service to self-orientated organization or person, being, whatever the term is, right? All they care about
politician.
Service to self. And when these politicians are in, and I don't think anyone would argue with this, they're not thinking about what could they do best for the country. Certainly here in Australia, the decisions are not made, what could we do best to help this country? They are doing, what could I do best that will make me get re-elected next time? Because that's their whole fundamental idea for existing. What am I going to do to not tick too many people off, not get too many people angry with us, so they might give us another term so that they can exist? So this service to themselves versus what is our orientation, doing what's best for the people. I feel like in a way, a lot of people have lost that. And your point about the internet being a powerful tool to help against these large corporations, a great example of that current right now is Prime Energy drink being #1 seller in the United States and overtaking Gatorade, which is a hundreds of $1 million company established for so long. Yet this little internet guy, Jake Paul, comes along, uses the power of the internet. Prime's the #1 seller now. And
I didn't even know it. Is it really? So he's out Gatorade?
Yeah.
Wow. There you go.
Bro,
And
that's huge.
and it's so gross. Sorry, I'm like my kids.
I don't drink energy drink. I don't.
No, I know, but the kids,
That's not the point, Roxy. I reckon the story.
When you're 8 and 9, and the kids want to try something because they're watching it on the internet, and you're just like, okay, a bit of free will here. You can have it once, but I have a taste of it, and it's not very nice at all. And you think, how? How?
But there's less sugar in it, and there's coconut water, and they're trying to make it healthier. Because let's face it, Gatorade and Powerade and all of those aids, they're not real good for you.
No.
Right? And it's perception. They cost less to make than a carbonated beverage because they don't need to carbonate it. There's a lot of sugar in it. I mean, it's not as bad as a Red Bull or a Mother Energy drink, but those things, a lot of these, that drink segment, I mean, people are getting so much sugar. They're worried about putting 1 or 2 sugars in their tea or their coffee. So instead, they have a Red Bull or a Mother. There's like 17 teaspoons of sugar in some of those big cans. Imagine if you had to add your own sugar, Ash. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, it's so much. Well,
5.
again, just going back to money and corporations influencing, what should be the truth. When you have like anything nutrition facts in the US, it shows like the daily allowance of like the daily allowance of fat and carbohydrates and sodium. And up until like the past like few years for sugar, it never showed you your percentage. So if you on a can of Coke that's got whatever 48 grams of sugar, which is like 96% of your daily allowance, um, it's just blank because people go, wait a second, that's a lot. It was blank up until a few years ago because the sugar industry essentially paid off the FDA to leave it off when really sugar is like the biggest killer. And I have a sweet tooth. I love, a good dessert. I appreciate sugar, but I try and be conscious of how much I'm having because I know that that's really the source of so many illnesses. Now, when we were kids, I remember everything was all about low fat or non-fat. Oh, you get the non-fat yogurt that's loaded with sugar. Get the low
Yeah.
fat option, the low fat milk that's loaded with sugar. And we all got told, oh yeah, the non-fat is the way to go because fat's the enemy. Total BS. Avocados have lots of fat in them. Eggs, all these things, but those are healthy fats. We were told to think that it's all about non-fat. The non-fat stuff is loaded with sugar because a lot of those things taste like crap without the fat in them. So they just pump the sugar. And again, what do? They take the percentage of how much sugar you should have off of the nutrition facts. So no one's putting two and two together, literally. There's a great documentary, I think it's called Fed Up, but it's all about like the sugar industry completely manipulating the nutrition facts and how sugar is the killer. And they just essentially gaslit us all to think that it's okay to pump something full of sugar as long as it's non-fat. It's like madness. But the biggest giveaway to the scam was the food pyramid. And I forget what it was, but there was one recently that just came out, and they were still trying to tell us that like a bowl of like sugary cereal was better for you than like a piece of like grilled chicken. Like,
Oh,
no one's buying this stuff anymore. Like we're all waking up, and they're
Yeah.
still trying to like sell us this thing of like eat lots of bread and grains and and don't worry about like I don't know. People are waking up though. That's the nice thing. And again, there's a lot of that's on the internet because there's a lot of doctors and health gurus that are able now to have a platform that because social media is now allowing things to be recommended from the algorithm, like you can actually find this stuff, and you can get a lot of other sources of health information besides, whatever the commercial is on TV that was sponsored by who knows who.
yeah, exactly.
So, Ash, I think it's great, that you're using these creative mediums, which are digital, which can have far reach, right? To sort of loop all this together to help make a change. Because it's people like you and us talking. Remember, we talked about that point of some people don't want to know. Well,
Yeah.
we want to know, and we also have some confidence enough to share some truth and to put the message out there. And we want to thank you for the work that you do in the music industry with encouraging your artists to, speak their truth and not water down their message. Like, have your message, make it clear, and it'll resonate with people. The same with the films that they might want to produce, and when they go into the production, sprinkling that little bits of wisdom in there, and those truths of the universe are in and around karma and energy, and everything's linked to all of that. So thank you for all the work that you do, and thanks for coming on and just sharing about how all of these things play out. We talk about spirituality, but it's not hiding in a cave in Tibet in your robes, humming and moaning and groaning. We're not going to change the world like that. That has its place. And certainly thank you to the monks up there sending us the good vibes. I do appreciate that. But for you and I, the active spirituality is we're in this 3D low vibe, corrupt, coercive, powerful place, and we've got to try and shine our light, right? And help this shift in consciousness. So thanks for that part you're playing.
Of course. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for what you guys do and putting yourselves out there, all week long, trying to spread, awareness and, transparency. It's very, very appreciated, very admirable.
Now, a lot of people are going to want to support you. Like, tell us about the label, some of the, you know, perhaps new bands you've got coming through, or great music, or perhaps productions that you're working on. How can people follow you and find out a bit more?
Yeah, so the label's called Sumerian Records. We focus on a lot of different styles of rock and alternative and metal. I call it kind of like all the colors of the rock and roll rainbow. We're very diverse in the sense of a lot of different styles. It's of mainly rock and alternative and metal, but it's that is like kind of the lane. So if you only listen to jazz or country or dance music or top 40 pop, you might not have as much fun with our roster, but we have a lot of stuff now that is really breaking a lot of boundaries musically. There's a band called Bad Omens who has exploded. There's a girl called Poppy who's really, really unique. Palais Royale is another one who's really exploded. They're from North America, but funny enough, their biggest markets are like Czech Republic, Turkey. I think Istanbul's their biggest city on all of Spotify. Hungary loves them. Poland loves them. They're doing really well. And you can go to Sumerian Records on Instagram or the website and kind of dive around and see all the different music. And then the film that I'm almost done in post, which will be premiering at some film festivals this fall, is called Queen of the Ring. It is based on the true story of, do I have a copy of the book here? Because the book is fantastic. It's by a Pulitzer Prize winning author, Jeff Lee, who's also an investigative journalist for the Washington Post. Sex, Muscles, and Diamonds, The Making of an American Legend, Queen of the Ring. The woman's name is Mildred Burke, and she was the first ever kind of world famous female pro wrestler. She started in the late 30s and went actively into the mid 50s. And again, as a pro wrestling fan, I never knew this story until Jim Ross, the wonderful commentator, turned me on to it. Women's wrestling was illegal in most of America for a very long time. In fact, the last state, which I would be surprised if you can guess what state it was, kept it illegal all the way until 1972. So we went through Woodstock in 69, and this state still wasn't letting two women get into the ring at the same time. But yeah, it was all the way till 1972. I'll give you the guys the chance if you want to guess the last two states that removed the ban, which again has culture has changed.
I would have thought it's a Bible Belt type state, so I'm going to go something out there like Texas or somewhere like that.
No.
See, that's what I would have thought too. In the story, you actually see that the South was like, okay, let the two girls in there and fight. They actually let women earlier on. California held out till 1965. New York held out till 1972. She never got to wrestle at Madison Square Garden because the New York State Athletic Commission was the last ones to allow two women at the same time. It's fascinating.
Makes so much sense, but the control over that, right, in those two states, though, now that we see so far down the track as to the control and where it lives.
And what California allows now, just saying.
It's a much different time. It's a much different time. But yeah, it's really an incredible story. She was a single mom. She raised her son on the road with her. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but she, you know, the main kind of challenge in her life was that her promoter, who was also her husband and her manager, was a brilliant genius when it comes to promoting women's wrestling. But he was also a total, you know, kind of misogynistic monster and abuser, both physically and emotionally. And so, but back then he was kind of the only guy that you could go. So imagine you're living in a time, you're an actress, and if you want to be in a movie, there's only one producer, and it's Harvey Weinstein. Like this was there wasn't like you could go to 10 different studios or something. He was the only show in town. So it's like having to do a deal with the devil to get ahead. But he's a complex character, Billy Wolf, because there's a lot of things you do love about him, and he's so great at what he does, and he is fighting for these women, and he did put women's wrestling on the map, but he has a lot of his own demons, and he has his own son. that ends up tour managing Mildred, and they have a dynamic there. And it's basically, you know, the parents and their kids, and they're all on tour together, and it's this incredible, you
Sounds
know,
good.
drama.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, like it does take place in the world of wrestling, but it really shows you the complications of, you know, mixing love and business, and you have both of your own kids, and the kids are grow up and they be friends, and but then the parents have all of this tumultuous
Mm.
toxicity happening, and it's a really fascinating story. But what really always hooks people, even if you're not into pro wrestling, is that we know pro wrestling now that it's scripted. Doesn't mean it's not dangerous. Doesn't mean you can't break your neck and die in the ring. But we know that the performers are working together to to pull the stunts off. They want it to look as real and as dangerous as possible, but they don't actually want to injure each other, right? It's theater meets circus in the world of sports. Back then, when the promoters and the talent and the managers couldn't agree on the finish, like who was going to win the belt, how the match was going to end,
Oh.
have what's called a shoot match, which is when they actually have to fight for real in the ring. So
Ah.
in this story, there are multiple shoot matches, including the big climactic ending of the film, where now normally the shoot matches happen behind closed doors, and whoever wins backstage gets to do it in the
Ah.
ring.
Ah.
But this happens with a live audience. So they're actually fighting for real in the ring for, I mean, it's really, I mean, it blew me away as a wrestling fan. I was like, I didn't know they actually had real shoot matches like in the ring at a sold out arena. But it's really an amazing story, and I think it's by far and away the best thing I've ever done, and I can't wait.
Oh,
it's good on you,
congratulations.
man. That like I'm
And,
really happy
and
to.
she's kind of like a forgotten legend. Like the WWE put her in, you know, like posthumously to the Hall of Fame, like in like 2010, I think. But she really did, like, just for like, you know, she truly changed culture. I mean, she was the first woman to be $1 million athlete. You know, and
Mm.
most people, unless you're a deep wrestling historian, you just have no idea. And she also changed. This is something that now is much more popular, which I think is great. But like back then, like pretty girls couldn't have muscles. You were either like a muscular, you know, bodybuilder lady, or you were a feminine, beautiful woman, right? There was no in between. And she kind of broke that wall down, which is now, you know, some of the biggest people on the internet are like fitness women, and it's become much more socially acceptable and admirable to be a woman, but also have, you know, muscular definition of your body and stuff. But back then, that was totally like, oh no, we don't do that. Like pretty girls can't have muscles. That's not how this works. And she really broke that down. She was glamorous, like, you know, a movie star, but she was also fit, and she could, I mean, she had to start off wrestling men at the carnivals because they wouldn't let two women in. So she literally starts fighting guys at the carnival. I mean,
Ah,
it's a fun
it's
story.
so
That's
glamorous.
going to be a good story. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Yeah.
That's you know, it's funny. I never like been into it, but I grew up with Hulk Hogan and Macho
Yeah.
Man Randy Savage and Jake the
Randy
Snake,
Savage was
and
the
you
best.
know,
That was my favorite era. The late 80s into the early 90s was just amazing.
Mm.
Yeah.
that'll be a fun movie too after your success of this one. I'm sure. I'm really looking forward to that. Watching that one.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
All the best with the launch of it, of course. And man, thanks for coming on and having a chat to us today.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate you.